We got 2 weeks to catch up. Well, technically 2 weeks previously, and we're gonna try to catch up next on Table Talk. Hey, welcome back to Table Talk, and our table is now just 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
Empty. A little emptier.
Yeah, we sort of kicked Nick out, didn't we?
Yeah, well, he decided he had his fill, so.
So I'm Kyle here with Alex, still with us a couple more months, I think, right?
Yep, about 2 months exactly.
Oh, really? Is it exactly?
I think so.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, the plan was 3 months, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you came middle of May.
Yep.
That's correct. That is correct. You are right at 2 months. So, I know you're looking forward to moving back to Wilmore,
Yep.
Kentucky.
Yep,
right?
back to cemetery.
So we're gonna do a little catch up. So last two Sundays previous to this podcast being dropped, Bobby preached, then Nick preached, and so we'll go back 2 weeks ago. And Bobby brought up something in probably opening illustration that I experienced. I don't know about you, but have you ever been to the beach before?
Indeed.
You've lived north in your whole
Yeah.
life, right? So made a number of trips to the beach.
Many day trips.
Yep, I did too. Now we had about an hour and 45-minute drive to the beach from my house. So we did some day trips when I was a kid. So did you go when you were younger?
Oh, yeah.
Did you experience that getting into the ocean and then all of a sudden look up and you're way away from
Oh, yeah.
your family?
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me. Did you ever get scared?
Sometimes. I mean, I remember if you get too far, my parents were usually pretty vigilant and would start calling out pretty quickly, so.
I remember there was times that I couldn't see them,
Mhm.
and I got scared because where'd they go? Because I was young, and I also remember getting out. I never got caught in the undertow, but I could feel the pull of it.
Yeah.
And that would freak me out. I just hardly ever went somewhere where I got over my head where that undertow would actually take me. But there were times when I just looked up and they were way away. And you know what kept me going back to where my parents were?
What's that?
Food.
Yeah. Because that's strong motivator.
Yeah, I had food and drink, so that was the reason I was going back and going back, and otherwise I kept playing in the golf all the time. So Bobby used that illustration when she was a kid, and a lot of people around here understood that. And she talked about that drifting from God, and her whole topic was really about sin. And so when you think about people drifting away from God, or if you want to, use your own illustration or your own life to think about it, why is that such in your mind or your experience, why is that such a good illustration of how we sin and sin in our life?
I think it's super easy in our lives that when we are playing in the water, so to speak, that we kind of take our eyes off our parents. The strategy should be, keep playing, but, kind of keep your eyes on your parents so that you know where they're at. But a lot of times you just get distracted and you stop thinking about it while you're in the middle of the water. And in our lives too, we know that we should be keeping our eyes on God and should be keeping him at the center of everything we do. But as we go through our lives, sometimes we just let ourselves get distracted.
There was a point that I had in my notes was about little decisions become new directions for us, and sometimes that those little decisions will take us away, right? And it's an illustration of about, if I'm going from here to California, and I'm going in a straight line, but if I'm 1 degree off, I'm gonna be way off.
Right.
Right. But if I'm walking from here to the office next door and I'm 1 degree off, I'm gonna still make the office.
Right.
But over the long course, those little directions, those just a little bit of a change takes you way, way off course. And I think that's where I see so many people, in their drift. It's more the little things.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the big things. We think of the big things as breaking the big 10 commandments and stuff. Yeah, we do see those, but
Sure.
but if you talk to most people, they'll say, "Yeah, I follow the big 10."
Right.
That's not the issue. I don't really lie to everyone, but they don't tell the complete truth.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? No, I don't murder anybody, but Jesus actually said it's not about murder, it's the
Yeah.
thought behind it
Yeah.
that will actually get you into trouble. So what are some drifts you've seen in people's lives,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you're associated with?
It kind of reminds me of the story of David and Bathsheba, and how that didn't start with David inviting Bathsheba to his house. It started with when the season for kings to go out to war. David was on his rooftop. He should have been out to war. He should have been seeking God first, but it started with drifting away from doing what you're supposed to do and letting yourself get lazy. And then it moved on. Now he's looking at Bathsheba, and now he's inviting her to his house, and so forth and so forth. So I think what I have seen mostly in the people in my life is on fire for God, keeping up with spiritual disciplines, reading the word, going to church, staying in prayer, and then maybe they just get frustrated or disappointed, so they say, okay, well, I'm just going to take a break for a bit, or okay, it doesn't really matter that much because I'll just get back on it next week or tomorrow. And then that little decision, that's not a huge deal, builds into bigger and bigger and bigger decisions, like you're saying. And it doesn't start with sin, but it starts with letting your mind drift away from God.
Yeah.
And the more it does that, well, then the more open you are to sin, right? Not keeping that watch on yourself. Like Peter says, our enemy roars around like a roaring lion. Keep watch.
And we, you've been a part of our staff where we went through a 8-week deal about the practicing the way, and one of the phrases is called rule of life.
Mhm.
Right. And it's really just, another way, if people are listening to this, you'll know in August, we're going to be talking about it in August. But rule of life is really, when it comes down to it, is what's your routine? What's a routine?
Mm.
It's really, what we're going to be teaching people and encouraging people is everybody has a rule of life. Everybody has a routine in their life. So what is it that keeps that you should be keeping in your life that keeps you on a direction of following your rabbi, of being apprentice to Jesus, and those things I have noticed, Alex, because there's I share with you before off camera the few things that I've changed and is doing in my life, but I did notice that I took a break and didn't do one of those. One of those was daily walk, and when I had to skip 2 days.
Yeah.
For reasons sort of beyond my control. I slept late.
Sure.
But so back to even just taking the 2-day break, when I got back on it, it was not the same.
Mhm.
I already lost pace.
Yeah.
I lost pace. And if you think about some of the things that actually make a spiritual difference when you forget to do those or purposely not do those, it really throws your direction off. It takes a while to come back. And that's what, the deal with drifting away, and particularly when when you brought up the spiritual disciplines or the things that Jesus and the early church did to make sure that they could keep following closely to Jesus. When you talk about those, and people will try them off and on. Very very few people will keep it up.
Yeah.
I anticipate that when we finish the study, August or September, there's going to be a number of people who'll be on fire, right? They're going to say, I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to keep doing this. And then inevitably,
Yeah.
one by one, they'll stop doing some things or they'll forget for a while.
The church version of New Year's resolutions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what it is. But my goal is to keep, as long as people are working toward not drifting, to use our language today, if they're thinking about it, we're still better off.
Right.
Right. We're still better off. We're still trying to move closer in our walk with Jesus, and using the terms that some of our folks have heard, getting the dust off the rabbi whenever we're following the rabbi, and getting a little more dusty, and getting a little more closer. So anyway, so that's the drift thing, that the sin that has been from the very beginning of time. And when Bobby was sharing that, the question that was sort of asked from God when the first sin happened, according to Genesis, when Adam and Eve disobeyed God. His first question wasn't, "What have you done?" His first question was, "Where are you?"
Yeah.
So why is that significant?
I think even in talking about what we've been talking about, it's easy for people to feel a sense of condemnation, like, especially if you've been keeping up with, you haven't gone to church in years, and then one day you just happen to oversleep and you miss a day, and that's okay, that's not a sin, but you just, you have to keep watch and get back on it, right? But the devil is going to take every advantage he can to say, oh, well, look what you've done now. God doesn't love you. Even if it's not some gross 10 commandment breaking sin, any opportunity that your mind can get to just condemn you, it's going to happen. And so we need to understand the Father heart of God, that he's not saying, make sure you do every single step correctly or else I'm going to be mad at you. He's saying, I want you to keep watch of yourself because I want to stay close to you. Be intentional about staying close to me because I want to stay close to you. And I'm not going to force you to do that. And so if we ever find ourselves drifting, if we ever find ourselves kind of just floating away, our immediate response shouldn't be to feel shame or go further and put ourselves in, the penalty box, but just go straight back, because God isn't, like you said, he's not saying, what did you do? What's wrong with you? He's saying, where are you? Come back. And that's hard to do, but it's necessary.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that the more people drift, and going back to the analogy, the smaller God looks. The further away, if you remember when you got way down the beach, you could barely see your parents or whoever else was there, and just little small people. The further away you got, and sometimes I think we think that about God, but if we go back to that analogy, the drifting analogy, and what happened in Genesis in the garden, if this all happened on the beach, right? Adam and Eve were in the ocean drifting. When they look back, they wouldn't have found they wouldn't have seen this little picture of God a half a mile up the beach.
Yeah.
They actually saw God in the water right beside them.
Mm.
That's the image that we have, that before they even realized, before they even thought they did something wrong, God was pursuing them. God was right there. And we're actually going to basically spend 3 weeks around this same idea, because I'm going to talk about God coming close this coming Sunday, the 21st. And we sort of keep repeating that same theme, with the sin. And then this past Sunday, Nick talked about God speaking,
Right.
type thing. And it's all going to be around this idea of God pursuing. God keeps doing that. So when Nick talked about God speaking to us, that there was the question, why does it feel like God is silent? And when you think about that, why do I guess he was talking about Moses, right? Talking about Moses this week, and Moses didn't hear from God. Didn't hear from God for
Right.
40 years or whatever. So why do some of us feel like God is silent?
Mhm. There is a sense in which, to us, in our current state of being, God is silent because it's hard for physical human beings to hear the voice of a spiritual God, right? And I mean, God even says to Moses, "You can't see me, but I'll let you look at the shadow of my back," So there's a sense in which if we were to really just hear the audible voice of the holy God all the time, it would be too much. There's another sense in which God is speaking to us in ways that we can hear, and oftentimes we don't listen or we're not able to. Um, as Nick brought up, he's already given us his word in the form of scripture. And, the Bible is not just what God has said, it's what God is saying, right? For all people everywhere. And so that's where you start. You start by hearing God through the means he's given us, through prayer, through scripture, through other people, through communion. And does God lead us in a spiritual, personal way? He absolutely does. But in order for us to have that daily walk with God, we need to keep up intentional moments where we're explicitly setting aside time to seek him and know what the voice of God sounds like. And then when we do that, it becomes a lot easier to hear God in the daily walk. And that doesn't often sound like an audible voice, because that's just not how God operates. It sounds like God giving us wisdom and guidance and comfort throughout the day, to lead us where he wants us to go, right?
Have you ever heard the audible voice of God?
I personally have not, but I have had
How close? How close?
Yeah. I've had times where I definitely felt like God was saying something specific to me in my spirit. And that's not every day, but it definitely does happen, right?
So I know you had a conversation with Nick about your call, quote
Mhm.
unquote, call into the ministry. Was there a particular, you feel like a particular urging, and for lack of a better word, voice that you sort of internally heard that says, yeah, Alex, this is where you need to go?
Yeah. It's funny because that hasn't happened a ton for my call to ministry specifically. The call to ministry has mainly come actually through the word. And, I was really conflicted, like, God, what do you want me to do? And sometimes I would just stumble randomly across a verse in the Bible that did not have anything to do with me, was not the interpretation, but was very clearly for me. Like,
Yeah.
God wanted me to see that at that time, and other people affirming that in me. and just a sense of comfort and a sense of confidence in that you just know is from God.
Yeah.
Right? I think the most times I've heard, I don't want to say audible, but close to an audible voice would just be times of discouragement where sometimes God would just grab a hold of me and say, I love you.
Yeah.
And I forgive you. I remember one night I was really, really struggling, and I just decided I need to pray, and the Spirit of God just came upon me. And I just knew in that moment like that, my sins are forgiven. I'm loved. God is with me. And so that for me has been my personal experience. And I really try to be careful to not tell people that because they're not hearing some kind of like audible voice, that means they're not hearing from God. Because it's important for me, for people to know that God is trying to raise us up to be mature Christians. And he does that through the subtle guidance of his Spirit, giving us comfort every day, giving us guidance every day in ways that we often don't see. So,
Yeah. I think people, I think there are people that actually hear, they hear an audible voice. And in 84, it felt like an internal voice.
yeah.
But I guess when I was telling people about it, and the 3 preachers I went to talk to, and then also when you end up having to talk to the board of ordained ministry, I felt like I heard the voice of God, saying this is where you're to go. You know, once keep on track, your undergrad thing, but you're gonna be a preacher type thing. So I did feel like the voice, and then sometime, I guess it was that same year. That same year, it was interesting. I had it felt like a pretty bad asthma attack. Probably the worst one that I've ever remember having. And this really came back to me not too long ago. That I remember a guy named Dick Steinberg, fraternity brother. I guess he was a senior that year, and I was a freshman. I guess I was a pledge technically, and he saw me struggling, and he said, "Let me pray with you," and he prayed for healing, and it never dawned on me that God was speaking through him for healing, because I promise you, now I had some attacks. I never was bad enough to go to the hospital or anything like that. And then when my first year in seminary was at Asbury at Morrison Hall, who was the oldest building on campus, and I lived there. Mowing stuff was really bad, and so I had to. I moved out and I was fine, but outside of that semester and have a little bit of issues, I hadn't had an attack like that bad since Dick prayed for me.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I was. Well, I know I wasn't completely healed from that, but it definitely was a lot better after that. And then in my first church, was a guy sort of went nutso, had a mental issue, and his wife and son came to church that night, just probably 48 hours after his mental issue. He was in the psychiatric unit in Tallahassee. And it was clear as day, the image that God gave me, that there's going to be reconciliation, that you're going to still be a family. Yeah. And so God showed me that.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's God speaking. Right. So, and then I think this all goes back to what you were saying. You talked about the spiritual disciplines earlier, talking about God's already speaking to us. If I know that God will get people's attention that have been not paying attention to him. Yeah. I know that happens, but for day in and day out average person that's listening to this podcast, how will you recognize God's voice? By daily knowing what that voice has already said,
Yeah.
right? And because here's something that I've been told this year after year, it's been taught. God's not going to contradict what He's already said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, He's already told us. So we have to know God's word, in other words, before we can hear God's voice.
Right.
And so the more we're in that, then when we hear, quote unquote, an impression or get some kind of word of knowledge or something like that, if we're already in God's word, then we're going to understand and recognize, okay, this is from God.
Yeah.
Like you were saying when you were reading and stuff. So that doesn't happen. I know it happens randomly to some people that God gets their attention and stuff. But but for those of us who are committed to Jesus, committed to following God, you know, we have to put ourselves in that daily position.
Yeah.
To hear from them. That's what I believe, because uh, God's not done. God's not done talking to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know some people believe that everything contained in God's word is one and done, right?
Sure.
Yeah, they think He's one and done. That doesn't click with the rest of the New Testament,
Mm-hmm.
because God clearly revealed Himself to Saul.
Yeah.
Right, and early church, and and there's been too many people that have either been impressed to say something about up to someone, or literally God spoke through them.
Mm-hmm.
that just gets people's attention, and so I think, I really think that sometimes the reason that we feel that God is silent, because we're not listening.
Yeah.
I think we put ourselves in a position. I think hadn't you started to put into practice some solitude, silence stuff,
Yeah.
right? You started to doing that. You didn't. I've told you I've started doing that, and when I just shut up and listen, it's amazing what I hear.
Yeah.
And not just birds and dogs. I mean, I hear other stuff too. So, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of the difficulty is, like you said, it's hard to just believe it sometimes. Like, even in contexts where there's a more cessationist background and God is one and done, that kind of thing, God is still speaking to people who are faithfully following Him, even if they won't recognize it in that way. Oftentimes, I think even people in a continuationist tradition who believe God is speaking will hear the voice of God in their lives, an impression in their heart, and they'll just think, oh, that couldn't be God, and just throw it away. But I mean, the question is, why not, right? Like, if you're faithfully following God, and that what His voice sounds like, you're in the Word, you're in prayer, you're seeking for God to lead you, why wouldn't it be? It's consistent with His Word. Why would that not be God leading you to go talk to that person? Or why would that not be God giving you a word for someone else for them to hear? Why would God not be giving you a word of encouragement or rebuke or vision for yourself? And I mean, maybe not. We're not infallible. We're not inerrant. We can be wrong. But I don't see a problem with saying, Lord, if this is you, then just continue to give me confidence in that.
Yeah.
And I'll obey it to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Well, I want to get the voice of Gothard in, because if I remember, Alan, you've felt some of this before, hadn't you?
Certainly, I can say that I have. It's hard to bring it into words, but I can't find them. I'm sorry.
No, but you've talked about you felt God impressed upon you a number of times in the last couple of years, right?
Every day, I mean, it's an active thing. He's a living God, and when you know he's speaking to you, it is obvious. And having the spiritual discernment to understand when that is happening is very important. And I'm losing the words, but when God is speaking to you, it is obvious.
Yeah, and the reason I brought you in because I need to do the young person. I mean, you and that Alex are the young guys. I'm the 60-year-old that's still trying to pick this up, but you guys are picking it up now, which is amazing because that was the younger. And when I was younger, I'm not sure I really understood it, but it's taken me a long time. But you guys are I think realizing it, which is great. So I'm just gonna close with this one thing that was sort of funny. That this statement that Nick made: when God says lose your shoes, get used to being barefoot. So sort of funny. I don't mean you heard that. Of course, you had to hear it twice because you're working the sound. So more than that, I think he repeated it 3 or 4 times, didn't he? So when you heard, what did you think about that, man?
He's just like, God isn't going to put you somewhere where you're not supposed to be. And when you get put into a position, but you know that God has put you there, and like I said, it's like using the analogy, if God has put you somewhere barefoot, you better get used to it. He didn't do that to be hard on you, per se, but he's doing that to build you up. He's doing that to show you something within yourself or to put you further along into a way that you need to be.
Yeah.
And I've just experienced that a lot in myself where I've been very unsure about paths in my life or things that necessarily I was focused on for personal reasons. But then taking a second to go, well, wait a minute. There's a lot more people on this earth than me. There's a lot more people that God is taking care of than me. So I'm here where I am for a reason, and I got to get used to that and make the best of it.
Yeah.
And do what God's will is in that and pray for that to continue in that.
All right. So Alex, one of the deals that, this brings up when God tells you to take off your shoes, get used to being barefoot, it leads to inevitably the loss of control. So, as a young guy, that, you had your eyes set on Troy, you had your eyes set on Asbury Theological Seminary. Do you feel like you're in control? Do you feel like you lost control? You feel comfortable not knowing? So
I feel like these past, 6 years of being a Christian or so, I have definitely not been in control of much of anything. I think that I've had many plans that God didn't have and that I wanted that didn't work out and that I get upset about, but God had something better every time. And that's part of the problem with hearing the voice of God is that sometimes God says stuff we don't want to hear. Like Nick talked about, sometimes God would say stuff and he'd get upset about it because it wasn't what he wanted to hear, but it was what he needed. And it's God always says what we need, not what we want.
yeah.
And a lot of the times that's leading us in a direction we don't want to go, doing something scary. Sometimes that's not telling us what the next step is at all, but speaking encouragement, like Nick said, about his character and who he is and his faithfulness to lead us and giving us that discernment, giving us that wisdom. So I think if we want to hear the voice of God, the number one thing is to just be willing to be obedient, be willing to submit to him, and take off your shoes when he says, Moses, come near. So,
Even if we have stinky feet.
sure. Yep.
All right.
Come as you are.
Come as you are.
All right. All right. Thanks for the conversation, guys. And I don't know when the next one will be, but we'll have a podcast drop always after the Monday after the Sunday message. And then we'll see what the next one holds after this one. Y'all have a great day. Thanks again, Alex. And thanks, Alan, for producing and jumping in, my buddy. And I'll be seeing you.